Build a Big Podcast, David Hooper here, talking about rock stars. I was working with a guy from Rolling Stone yesterday, and he mentioned a backlash that he has gotten. And the reason for that is he is very critical of artists who don't play instruments and artists who don't write their own songs. Now, Nashville, where I am, we're a songwriting town, man. So I said, what's the deal with people who don't write their own songs? Why do you feel so strongly about them? And he says, I want to know who these artists are. I want to know where they came from, where they stand. And you can't do that when you're singing somebody else's words. Now, I don't entirely agree with that. I think there's some things that are universal. Love, relationships, money, power, whatever. Sometimes great writers, great songwriters, if they're writing for a specific artist, and it's almost as if the artist wrote that song himself. But I get the point. Because how do we really know who somebody is if he's not using his own words? That is why I'm bringing this up here. The same thing that this writer for Rolling Stone thinks is the same thing that podcast listeners are thinking. How many times have you listened to a podcast when the host is saying the exact same thing that you heard on somebody else's podcast? There's a lot of stuff that gets repurposed, especially in the business world, the marketing world, the agency world, any industry that you are in. We borrow from each other. To take it back to country music, for example, one country song sounds like the next country song, sounds like the next country song, because if somebody has had success with a song, the people following him, they want success. They say, hey, we'll just do what he did. And we do that in podcasting. Somebody has success. Say, hey, let's copy that guy. But that's not necessarily a great long-term strategy because the people who are listening to you, they don't want what the other guy is doing. This isn't radio. We don't need our version of Howard Stern because we can't get Howard Stern where we are. That's the old days. With podcasting, we are not geographically bound. So the podcast you can get in New York is the same podcast I can get in Nashville, the same podcast some guy can get in LA, the same podcast somebody can get in Tokyo, Japan. That means we have to play a different game. People want something authentic. They don't need it to be perfect, but they want it to be real. If you're giving out information, I mentioned marketing, podcasting, nursing, whatever it is, those industries where we copy from each other, people want the experience that you have, not necessarily the info. And the info that you do have, it needs to come from experience, not from books, not from other podcasts. I had a guy tell me one time, this is about one of my books, Six Figure Musician. He said, I feel like you've been there, like you're one of these guys that you're writing to. And I was like, yeah, I have been there. I was a musician. I was in the music industry for 20-something years. That's how I learned all this marketing stuff, about how to build influence, build an audience, connect with people. So yeah, I've been there. And you can tell when you read my writing. When I talk about podcasting, it's the same thing. I can talk about podcasting because I've done it. I'm doing it. I edit my own podcast. Why do I do that? Because I want to be very clear on the information that I'm getting out. I want to be very clear on the skill set that I have. I don't want to hand it off to somebody else, let him deal with it, never learn the lessons that I need to learn from it. Are you with me? I'm talking about diving deep, experiencing it just like a listener would experience it, because that's what lets you connect with your listeners. So when it comes to your podcast, take some advice from my friend from Rolling Stone. Don't sing somebody else's words. Don't talk about somebody else's life, somebody else's experiences. Live your life. Live your experiences. People want hosts who are dirty. And I'm not talking about in a kinky way. Well, maybe. There's definitely a market for that. But I'm talking about hosts that aren't too clean, too perfect. Be that host. Don't be afraid to get dirty because people want something that's real. Tomorrow, more podcasting lessons from a rock star. You're going to love this. I got blown off by a rock star. Not in a dirty way. In the not so good way. That's tomorrow. And to make sure that you don't miss it, go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. One click subscribe, whether you listen on iPhone, Android, you want an old-fashioned RSS feed, I've got it there. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. While you are there, sign up for my mailing list. I got some goodies for you, man. I got a social media kit for you. It's free when you join my mailing list. It's going to get you hooked up on some great strategies you can use to grow your audience for your podcast via social media. It's all available at bigpodcast.com. So go there right now before you forget. get that social media kit, subscribe to the podcast, and I will see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.